Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
My guest today is musician-producer CJ Vanston. His credits include Joe Cocker, Spinal Tap, Toto. Dear God, I could be here all day just listing them, couldn't I?
It's kind of a long list, yeah. When I look at it, I feel old.
Let's just start with a little bit of background. I know you obviously come from a musical family. Your dad was an amazing pianist himself.
He sure was. My parents split up at an early age, and my dad got an apartment on top of the stage at a jazz club. And so he would just basically lock me and my brother in the apartment and go down and do his set. I mean, today it would be child services and helicopters and, but it was just, that's what they did then. And so they'd come up on break. And I just used to love the way they talked, the jazz cats, hanging out. And they were all so cool. And I remember Stan Kenton loved my dad's playing. He would always come to hear my dad. One day he came up in between sets. And there he is with his white hair, with his band. And, there's probably 10
Did you know
people.
who he was? I mean, how
yeah,
old were you?
because the album cover was sitting right over here.
Oh, I love it.
And I'm going, okay, that's the white hair, that's the white hair. Okay, that's it. Wow, this is the first time I've seen a celebrity. And then I looked and I thought, well, these guys can't be that rich. If they're that rich, how come they have to share a cigarette? I grew up, I studied classical music at an early age, was going to go to college and study. The summer before college, I snuck into a club and saw an all-black horn band, funk band, and it was like, blew my mind.
Sure.
It's called Sunquest was the name of the band. The lead singer was just this handsome, charismatic, amazing singer. I couldn't take my eyes off him. A month or so later, I'm playing in a club, and I look out, and he's at the bar, like, beading, his eyes are just beading right in on me, watching me. And I thought, this is the first time my brothers, because I came from an all-white town. So I did I had a mute trump, I don't know, auto Y, I did some funky stuff. I thought, he'll dig this, yeah. I got done and he was gone. So how could he leave during the set? And walked off the stage, crestfallen. He's standing right there and he says, y'all playing with us now. So I blew off college. I sold my car I got for graduation. I bought a Mini Moog. Next thing you know, I'm in a yellow school bus that says Pine Run Church of Christ on the side of it. That's what we used took the last 10 rows of seats out for the equipment and hit the road. And it was nuts. It was a great way to play 6 nights a week and get my chops up.
And probably a little bit of a culture shock too, huh?
Oh, it was fantastic. That was the real college. And then I moved on to different bands, all cover bands. Finally, one band, we decided to make a record, and we got some songwriters and headed to Chicago and went in the studio. The studio was called Pumpkin Studios, where Styx recorded all their records.
Ooh.
And I walked in like, oh my God, Styx recorded here. This is amazing. The owner's name was Gary Loizo. We did our basic tracks for 4 days or whatever it was. And then the 5th day, we did synth overdubs on 10 songs in one day. And he came out and he says, wow, where'd you learn how to do this? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, this studio, you're so great in the studio. I said, oh, this is the first time I've ever been in the studio. So I knew then that my home, I love playing live, and I've done a lot of it. Been all over the world with Joe Cocker and Spinal Tap, and Tina Turner, Tears for Fears. But the studio is my home. I ended up moving to Chicago and becoming a jingle musician. And that was really formative years, 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions a day of, at 10 a.m. you're a jazz musician. At noon, you're a country. Now you're playing with the Chicago Symphony. So it was a sight reading and sounds and a lot of these synthesizers, this vintage stuff is what I was programming then. So it was a great way to learn.
Not a lot of musicians get into it in a deadline-oriented capacity.
And if you fail, you're not called back again.
Right, exactly.
Capacity.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's definitely, feet to the fire. One of the guys I worked for was Dick Marx. He was the #1 producer there, and the second hand would go, tick, 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 and 1. I don't care where everybody was in the room. They'd run to their instruments, So he was a real stickler for time and preciseness. I ended up doing thousands of jingles over the next 8 or 9 years. I became the first call guy in Chicago. At some point, I just thought, I didn't study all this and get this good at this to make the sound of shrimp flying in the Red Lobster ad. So finally I decided, you know what, I've got to come out to LA and make records. And I was the #1 guy, so everyone thought, you're nuts, man. And the money was unbelievable back then. That wasn't really what was in my mind. That wasn't my concern. Dick said, well, my son is making a record out there, and you should go work with him, Richard Marx.
Richard Marx, uh-huh.
And so he called Richard and said, this CJ guy's great. You should have him on your record. He says, I'm in LA. There's 100 keyboard players out here. What do I need another keyboard player for? And Dick said, this guy's great. I want you to use him on something. So Richard gave me a song, the cassette, and he said, look, this isn't going to go on the record, but it might go in a movie someday. So I put it on, I heard it, and I'm like, oh, I know just what to do with this. So I did the demo of the song and brought it in. He put a vocal on it. We put a nylon guitar in the middle. That ended up being the record, and the record was Right Here Waiting, one of the biggest hits of the 80s.
So you had sort of almost a carte blanche introduction to LA studio work.
It was unbelievable. It was the #1 hit, and now my phone is ringing. It's like, hello, yeah, my name's Phil Ramone. Hi, my name's Desmond Child. David Foster. These people calling me because they heard this single. And it was a radically different song because it didn't have drums on it.
What are the odds for most people coming into LA, where everybody wants to be a studio musician, to walk in and get any gig at all, let alone get a great gig,
right?
And get a first call gig?
Well, the key is get one and be great. I was so fast from doing 1-hour jingle sessions. I had about 10 synthesizers, and I would combine a bunch of these to get a great pad sound and then punch me in and play it live. But the richness of combining all those back then, there was a different sound to that was really huge.
Not only did you have different sounds, but you had different sounds from different manufacturers. And
That's
at that
right.
point,
I was just going to say that.
You also came in, though, with a fair amount of studio knowledge, which is also unusual for a player.
I was always interested in engineering. And, in between takes, when guys would sit out and tell jokes, I would go in and stand behind the producer. And one thing that I valued greatly was, I came here and did, 400 or 500 records with the greatest engineers and the greatest producers in the world on a day-by-day basis, and seeing how this guy works, seeing how this guy works, seeing how he works, So I learned production, I learned songwriting, and I learned engineering.
There's an overlap between being a contributing artist and being a producer. There are some artists who have it in their head. They're always producing themselves to a certain extent. What's your signal for, sort of learning the give and take? Well,
it starts, to me, from having a vocabulary.
Musical or verbal?
Musical. Okay. Musical vocabulary. That gave me a frame of reference. And then to be a jingle musician, where you played so many different styles, that means I can access a different language depending on who the artist is. But internal is my sense of what I like and what I want to hear. Using your instinct, and that has to come from a place of knowledge and hard work. The 10,000 hours,
Putting on your producer hat, getting a performance out of someone, it not only requires a musical vocabulary, but it really requires some interpersonal communication skills.
Well, again, this goes back to being a session player. I've been on the other end of that. I've had people direct me in a good way, people direct me in a bad way. So I've learned a lot about how to communicate ideas to a musician. And then obviously, there's different kinds of producers. There's many producers that don't play. Look, the whole thing we're trying to do is capture some magic that makes somebody feel something, right? And transfer emotion into them and change the way they're feeling, and make them feel sad, make them feel happy, make them feel poignant, whatever. And to do that, to get a performance like that, you have to create an atmosphere of trust in the studio where the artist feels like they can deliver. And that is the psychology part, and getting that brotherhood happening. Humor is one of the most valuable things about this industry to me. Musicians are just funny and love to laugh.
Yeah.
And that keeps things, when things get tense, somebody will say something funny and everyone will crack up. And what I've always said is if everybody's laughing, the music probably sounds pretty good. Because if the music sucks, you usually don't hear people laughing.
Most of the great comedians, I think, had musical talent as well, which is very interesting.
Well,
if
I
you
know
think
the
about
guys I work with.
the guys you've
from
worked with
Spinal
in
Tap
particular, yeah,
are all excellent musicians.
And comedy is just, I mean, comedy is life itself, man.
Yeah, and well, time plus tragedy equals comedy. You know, I do all the music to Christopher Guest movies. I think I've done 9 so far, or TV and films. It's an interesting thing with music with comedy. Chris always tells me you can't have 2 jokes. So if there's a joke on screen and I'm making the joke with the music, it's like, it's the hammer on, you know.
It's overkill.
It's overkill.
Uh-huh.
So comedy's really, it's tough to score, and it takes a certain way to navigate it.
And actually, I can imagine that trying to navigate not only Christopher Guest, but then Harry Shearer on top of that, because those are 2, they're very similar, but they're diametrically opposed types of senses of humor in a way, aren't they?
Definitely. But yeah, I love comedy, and you know, musicians are funny. And growing up with my dad and being around all the jazz musicians and the jokes and that hilarious stories.
Well, jazz
he used to
musicians
tell.
are the best.
Oh my God, the stories my dad would tell about them on the road and the hilarious stuff. You know, our job as musicians is to take chaos and create order from it, and communicate that, or take order and create chaos, but convert
unless
something.
you're bebop, you know.
Yeah, convert energy into something else that's expressible. I'm hoping, you know, we're in the middle of this awful coronavirus. I'm hoping, I really believe that this is going to be one of the greatest creative times of our generation. If you look at after World War I, you had the Roaring '20s. After World War II, you had the '50s and the birth of rock and roll. And the '60s was, look what came from that. Crazy. 60s in Vietnam and the civil rights and everything from that. So,
well, and if anything is a parallel to that, there are so many parallels to that going on right now.
yeah.
So, you know, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that the happy times bring out some boring music.